Looking for an amazing vacation, but not thinking you want to leave the US? We got you covered. On this episode of Travel Talk, we're talking about Adventures by Disney trips within the United States.
Welcome to Travel Talk, where our expert magical memory planners discuss ways you can have fun, memorable, stress-free family vacations.
Welcome to another episode of Travel Talk. Today, we're talking about Adventures by Disney and their US destinations. So, you may have heard us talk about Adventures by Disney before. It is one of our favorite things. And so, if you're familiar with these tours, or even if you're not, we're going to get a little bit more detail about what they are today. But we're going to focus in on some of the US destinations because you may be thinking you need a bucket list trip checked off your list. You may be thinking it's a graduation or a milestone coming up and you want to do something really interesting or something different, but you're thinking, I'm not sure I want to leave the United States or I have never traveled overseas before. We got you covered. These Adventures by Disney destination trips in the United States are absolutely amazing. We'll check all your boxes and you will love them. So, we are going to talk about four of the United States based destination trips today. We're going to be talking about Alaska, a trip to Wyoming, another trip that is both Arizona and Utah. Is the title of it, although you do fly home from Colorado, so you'll step foot in that state as well, and then Southern California. Okay, so let's get started. First of all, why book a trip for the United States? You know, a lot of people are looking for those big adventurous trips, but maybe you don't have a passport and it's going to take a little while to get one and you don't want to have to deal with that. Maybe you're looking for just simpler travel without having to deal with things that international customs, and maybe it's lower airfare costs, or maybe one of these destinations are something that you could do a road trip to and you wouldn't have to add the cost of airfare. And they're also great first Adventures by Disney trips. Maybe you're thinking, I'd love to try Adventures by Disney, but I'm not sure if I want to make a trip to Africa as my first choice. I'd like to try something a little bit closer to home to see if it's a good vibe for us. So, these are all the reasons why you might want to try one of the US destination trips from Adventures by Disney. And as we go through these four trips, I am going to tell you some of the details about what sets Adventures by Disney apart as well. All right. So, zoom, here we go. We're going to our first destination, and that is Alaska. Alaska is on so many people's bucket lists. It is such an amazing trip, and especially with Adventures by Disney. So, for a quick overview of the trip, let's start there. Alaska ABD is a round trip out of Anchorage. So you'll fly in and out of Anchorage for this trip. It is a 7 night, 8 day trip, and it goes to Anchorage, Talkeetna, Denali National Park, and Girdwood, which you may not have heard of Girdwood, but we're going to talk about that a little bit as we talk about some of the trip highlights for Alaska. So, really, the Adventures by Disney trip, and this is just so Adventures by Disney-esque, you will hit all the main things in Alaska that you want to see. So, in those 7 days, which is just absolutely outstanding. So, one of the trip highlights is, of course, the Scenic Alaska Railroad Dome train to Denali National Park. So, a lot of people, when they think of Alaska, one of the items on their list is, I want to ride one of those trains with the glass dome so I can see all of the sights and all of the things. So, that is one of the cool highlights of this trip. There's also whitewater rafting. So, another great adventurous thing to do when you're out in Alaska is whitewater rafting. And this is near Denali National Park, kind of on the edge of the park, is where you'll go whitewater rafting. Another bucket list part of an Adventures by Disney trip to Alaska, which is again something think of when they think of Alaska, is the sled dogs and the animals. So you will spend some time at the Happy Trails kennel and see and learn all about the dogs that work in Alaska, the sled dogs and all the things that they do, and get up close and personal with those really adorable puppies. Another thing for Alaska, you might want to make sure is included in your trip, and of course is included in Adventures by Disney, is gold panning. So there's a lot of history with Alaska and the gold rush. And so you will go and do some gold panning and learn about the gold rush and all of those things. And this is going to be in Crow Creek. So really cool experience to get out there and try something maybe that you haven't done before. Another big highlight of the Alaska trip is the wildlife. There's some really amazing wildlife up in Alaska, and you will not miss that on this trip. So, you will spend some time at the Alaska Wildlife Conservation Center, and you will get to see some of the wildlife and learn about them and such. So, this is a really great trip to Alaska that covers, all of those big bucket list items when you're thinking about an Alaska vacation that you'd want to do and done in classic Adventures by Disney style, which is just like those amazing accommodations, the VIP services, the baggage handling, which is just out of this world. You are traveling, as you saw from the map, a couple of different places, and we're going through 4 cities. And so you will be changing hotels. And so Disney's magical luggage service really makes that easy for you. So just some of the great things about the Alaska itinerary. All right, now we are going to pop over to Wyoming. Adventures by Disney Wyoming is another one of the great trips to more national parks. And again, if you're thinking national parks is something that you want to do, but maybe you're not a rugged camper, maybe I'm not a rugged camper, then these Adventures by Disney trips to places like Denali National Park and what we're going to talk about in this itinerary and the next one are just some of the best ways, in my opinion, to see the national parks and get to experience all of the cool things to do without full-on camping. Not a camper myself, but that's okay. So if you are, that's also awesome. My husband hiked the Grand Canyon with my son and they had a wonderful time. I'm sure there are people that love to do that. That's just not me. But anyway, I digress. So let's talk about Adventures by Disney in Wyoming. So this trip is round trip out of Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And so you'll fly in and out of that city. It is a 7-night, 8-day trip. And so you will go through a couple of areas on this trip. You're going to start in Jackson Hole. You're going to go to Brooks Lake, which is, I'm going to talk about that at the end, but that is quite a highlight of this particular trip. You're going to go to Grand Teton National Park and Yellowstone National Park. So you can click a couple of those national parks off your list on this trip. So let me share with you a couple of the trip highlights on the Wyoming trip. So again, Adventures by Disney has just such a great way of bringing a family adventure into these trips. And so one of the fun activities is whitewater rafting on the Snake River in Wyoming. So that's a fun activity. You'll also go to Grand Teton National Park by bike and go on a tour of it. But I also want to point out, this is one of the cool things about Adventures by Disney is there are sometimes alternative activities. So maybe biking through the national park is not something everyone in your family wants to do. Maybe everyone wants to do it. Maybe some people want to do it. Maybe nobody wants to do it. That's okay. There's another alternate activity. So you can also do a hiking option, or if some of your people are not as mobile as wanting to go hiking, there's also the Discovery Center. So this is one of the things I just want to highlight about Adventures by Disney is their accommodations and the way you can kind of do this mix, which is why Adventures by Disney is awesome for multi-generational groups. So if the grandparents and the parents and the grandkids are all looking to do this like amazing adventure together, but maybe not everybody wants to go biking, some of those people could go to the Discovery Center instead. And so you'll all have an amazing Grand Teton National Park experience, but this will, you can access it in a few different ways based on your travel needs and style. So then you're also going to go to the lower loop of Yellowstone National Park. And then the last highlight is the last couple of days is at Brooks Lake Lodge. So Brooks Lake Lodge it really speaks to the amazing things that Adventures by Disney does and their VIP service. So Brooks Lake Lodge is absolutely gorgeous. The food is amazing. It's a wonderful, lodge in that area. And Adventures by Disney takes it over. So when you're there, the only people there are your group. which means that all the activities just center around what your group wants to do. So while you're there, you'll work with the guides and the people of Brooks Lake Lodge to pick your own activities, and you can design exactly what you want to do from what they offer there, which is just so amazing because with Adventures by Disney, you have your two adventure guides that are, in charge of your trip and helping with all of the details and such, but they're not the ones that have to do all these other tours. These are all going to be handled by the guides at Brooks Lake Lodge. So lots and lots of options that you can do. You're not going to be forced into doing an activity because everybody's doing that particular one. So some of the choices you can do at Brooks Lake Lodge is horseback riding, fly fishing, hiking, canoeing, and archery. And there's a lot of flexibility in how you do that. So one of my guests that did this itinerary, they had some of the young gents in their group. They were kind of a multi-gen group, and they had some young adult guys in their early 20s that wanted to go hiking to a very particular hike. And it was a very adventurous hike. And so they approached, Brooks Lake Lodge guides and said, this is what we're looking to do. Is this something we can do? And they were like, absolutely. They had sat phones, they had the trails, they had the equipment. They're like, let's do it. So those guys got to go on a quite adventurous hike that they really loved. Those memories were made. It was unbelievable. While other people in the family were doing horseback riding, and I think the grandma was doing fly fishing, and everybody was having a great time. And then they could come together at the end of the day and, rehearse what they did over the day and share their photos with each other. And just such a great way for everyone to have amazing magical memories throughout their experience and yet come together and see the sunset or something like that. So Brooks Lake Lodge is really a highlight of the Wyoming trip, in my opinion. So that is a little bit about Wyoming. And now we're going to head over to our third national park type trip. And this one is Adventures by Disney, Arizona and Utah is the title. So that's the one you'd be looking for if you wanted to do this. Although, as I said, it does include a little bit in Colorado. So this trip starts in Phoenix and ends at the Grand Junction Regional Airport in Colorado. So this one is not a round trip to the same city. It is what we'd call an open jaw or open-ended. And so you start in one place and end in another, which is great because it gives you the opportunity to travel kind of across a longer distance since you're not coming back to the original start point. This trip is also 7 nights and 8 days, and you'll be going through like 5 key places on this tour. So you start in Sedona, you'll be in Grand Canyon National Park, big bucket list item for a lot of people, Monument Valley, Moab, and then Arches National Park. So you will definitely be clicking off your places. If you listen to another podcast when I was talking about Alaska, I talked about my national parks book that I like to get checked off when I hit the national parks. So this is a great trip that will check off a few of those boxes. So let's dig into a few of the trip highlights of Arizona and Utah. So some of the itinerary here is we're going to talk about some of the highlights. So the Diamondback Gulch off-road tour through the Grand Arroyos. This is really cool because this is where you get to go into those off-road vehicles and take on the environment and go out on an adventure. And what better way to see some of these areas than being like out and about in an off-road vehicle? So super fun thing to do there. Then, when we head over to the Grand Canyon, it's a privately guided tour of the Grand Canyon National Park, and you will be in the South Rim area. And I believe the first night that you're there, you have a dinner overlooking that as well, which is just breathtaking. So, a great way to see the Grand Canyon with that private tour. The next thing on the tour that I want to highlight is the cookout dinner and Navajo storytelling in Monument Valley. And the reason I bring this up is because this is one of the things that I think really sets Adventures by Disney apart when it comes to their tours. And it really just goes back to Disney's kind of origin story and the storytelling that Disney is able to do. So when you visit all these places from, Alaska, Denali National Park, through all the other destinations Adventures by Disney takes you to, you really get the opportunity to dig in and embrace the culture and experience it. And a lot of that is done through storytelling. So this isn't like a lecture where someone's like, and if you arrive at the park at 7 p.m., you will find that there are a variety of animals located in the park. I mean, who wants to sit and listen to like a documentary? Maybe some people do. But Adventures by Disney is not that. They are storytellers. So you're going to learn the culture, you're going to be immersed, but it's not going to be like being talked at. You're going to be immersed in the culture. So this Navajo storytelling and cookout is like sitting outside, having this cookout dinner where your Navajo host is going to start telling you stories as the sun sets, and you get to hear his stories, in the night, looking at the stars. And you can close your eyes and just imagine like what it would have been like years ago when these stories were originated, and this was a family sitting around their campfire hearing these stories from maybe a leader in their group. So just unbelievable the way Disney can bring history and culture to life through their storytelling. And this is just a perfect example of how that happens. All right, back to the adventure in Adventures by Disney. You will also have whitewater rafting on this itinerary on the Colorado River. And then you will visit Arches National Park, where you can hike and learn the history of Arches National Park. Again, another beautiful place to see and explore. So those are the three tours in the US that really have a lot of national parks and the outdoors and all of that adventure and such involved. But there's a fourth tour that I wanted to talk about as well. And this is for our Disney fans. And this is a great first tour experience with Adventures by Disney for a couple of reasons. So there are two versions of this tour. This is the Adventures by Disney Disneyland and Southern California trip. And there are two options with this. There is one that has the same title and is called an Escape. So it's Adventures by Disney, Disneyland and Southern California Escape. Anytime you see an escape in the title of one of the Adventures by Disney trips, it means it's a shorter trip. So the escape trips are 3 nights, 4 days. That is a perfect introduction to Adventures by Disney if you are a Disney fan, or if you really want to get behind the scenes of the culture and history of the Disney company and Walt's experience. That is a must do. If you're looking for a longer experience and you have a little bit more time, then the full trip is maybe what you want to do. The full trip is 5 nights, 6 days, and it includes a 4 day ticket to the Disneyland park, which includes Disneyland and California Adventure. So there's some park time in there as well over the course of the trip. So you get some of that cool history stuff as well as that. So um, just to say that this is like the ultimate trip for the Disney fan. If you've loved Disney your whole life, this is the one that maybe you want to do, especially if you're maybe not as into the national parks and some of the outdoor adventure. All right, so let's talk about the trip highlights. And when I discuss these trip highlights, this is based on the full tour. So not all of these things will be in the escape version, but I just wanted to make sure I'm clear on that. So if you are looking at one of these two tours, we can dig in with you one-on-one and go through what's included in both so you can figure out which one is really going to be the best fit for you. But some of the highlights of the full tour, the private Hollywood excursion. Okay. So in this excursion, you're going to step into the spotlight on a private walking tour that puts you in the heart of Hollywood. So you get to go to the Chinese theater, see the handprints on Hollywood Boulevard with all the Hollywood legends, all of that kind of thing. So you are going to do Hollywood. Then you're going to spend some time at the Academy Museum. I'd like to thank the Academy. Yes, the Academy Museum. So you're going to tour the museum's exhibits and see just all that history and everything that they have about filmmaking from the past and the present. This is another real highlight that I don't know if you can do this if you're not on an Adventures by Disney tour. Maybe there are other ways to do this, but frankly, I wouldn't want to do it any other way anyway. But that is to visit Walt Disney Imagineering. So if you know a little bit about Disney, you'll know what I'm talking about. But in case you don't, I'm going to give you a little bit of background that Imagineering is kind of like a word Disney made up because they had all this like creative stuff, but then they had like engineering. So they had all this imagination and then they had all this engineering, like the animatronics. And they kind of made up this Imagineering where you're kind of putting those two things together. So there's an amazing rich history of Imagineering and how they've designed so many things and so many things that were created by Imagineering that didn't exist otherwise. One thing, which I don't know if this was particularly Imagineering, but one thing that the Walt Disney brought to life was the garbage can with the lids. Garbage cans used to be a waste basket that was open in parks, and he felt that that looked dirty and you didn't want to see the garbage and garbage would blow out. So he created these like covers and lids and all this stuff to what we really see as garbage cans everywhere now. Was a lot of that came from Imagineering and from the Disney history. So a tour to Walt Disney Imagineering is unbelievable and places that I think you can really only get with Adventures by Disney. And then you'll also get to go to the Walt Disney Studios and the Disney Archives reading room. Again, I don't know if those are even places I could be wrong, but I don't know if those are places that you can even go to unless you're on an Adventures by Disney tour. So that is just really unbelievable. And then, like I said, the second half of the trip, you'll be staying at Disney's Grand Californian Resort, which is right in Disneyland, Disney, California Adventure area. It's one of the on-site Disney hotels at the park. And you'll be there for a couple of days. You'll do a VIP tour. You'll do some behind the scenes stuff. You'll, of course, get to ride lots of rides and do some of that vacation stuff that you would normally do on a Disney Parks vacation. And then you're also going to get to go see Walt's apartment, which again is rich in Disney history. If you are a Disney fan, that is one of the coolest things to go to his original apartment. And currently, there is a light on in the apartment. And I'll tell you a little story when I went on one of the tours at Disneyland that I heard. And that is that whenever Walt was in the park, he would have his light on and they would see coming into the park. His apartment is right over the, oh my word, why can't I think of the word? I was gonna say train station, but it's not a train station. It's right over the firehouse. There's like a fire station that's not really a fire station, but that's what it looks like because it's Main Street. And right over the firehouse is Walt's apartment. So when Walt was in the park, he would have his light on because he'd be up there working and he'd be up there all the time. And as cast members came into the park, they would look up and if they saw the light was on, they knew that Walt was there. And so they would make sure that they were on their best behavior and put on the best show. After Walt passed away, they decided to light a light in the window so that people, the cast, would always look up and see the light on and remember that Walt was always there, always looking over them and always with them. And so to this day, the light is on in the apartment in a like a candle by the window. And that just reminds us that Walt's, always in the park, his spirit is there. And it's just kind of a cool thing. So on this tour, you get to go tour his apartment that's in Disneyland Park, and it's just such a cool thing. So if you are a Disney fan, the Disney California and Southern California and Disneyland Adventures by Disney trip is really top notch and one of the best ways, and maybe some of the only ways to see some of those things. So really, really cool. So if you are thinking, hey, we want to do a vacation. Hey, maybe we want to do something in the United States, but we really want it to be nice. We want it to make memories. We want to celebrate a milestone. Maybe you've been thinking you want to try Adventures by Disney, but you're not really sure. Maybe one of the escapes, which would be to the Southern California one, has an escape, or one of these other trips in the United States might be the way to go. And of course, we're always here to help.